Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us on a Friday afternoon, and welcome to the webinar series jointly hosted by CBSE and Educational Initiatives on developing competency-based questions. Our focus today is on English. Let me begin by introducing our panelists for the day. I'd like to welcome Dr. Pragya Singh, Joint Secretary, CBSE Academics. Welcome, ma'am. Ms. Ruchi Sengar, CBSE Resource Person. Welcome, ma'am. Bindu Balan, Senior Educational Research Fellow at Educational Initiatives. Welcome, Bindu. And I am Sarita Tukaram from Educational Initiatives, and I will be your moderator today. Our panelists today bring with them a wealth of knowledge and experience from the field of education. So who better than them to guide us on creating good multiple choice questions? I will start with quickly walking all of you through the agenda for our session. We'll begin with an introductory note by Dr. Pragya Singh. Then we'll have a quick run through of the characteristics of good MCQs. Bindu will tell us about the nuances of case study based passages and questions, following which Ms. Sengar will deep dive into creating assertion reasoning questions and MCQs on writing skills. We'll end with a Q&A session. Before we begin the session for the day, I just want to go over some housekeeping rules. If you have questions during the course of the webinar, please use the chat window. Our team will be monitoring the questions as they come in, and we'll answer them either during the webinar or at the question and answer session towards the end of the webinar. The chat box, the description box on YouTube also has a survey link, which we'd like you to fill in at the end of the webinar. This will give us some feedback on what you thought of the webinar and how it met your learning needs. Now, may I request Dr. Pragya Singh to share her thoughts on the idea behind the webinar and what we hope to achieve through this 90-minute discussion today. Dr. Singh?
Maybe she's sort of joining in. Must be a little technical glitch.
Let's give it a minute.
Yeah. Sarita, in the meantime, could you talk about a little more in detail about the agenda once again, just so everyone who just joined in would know? Yeah.
Sure, ma'am. Yes, absolutely.
Take the agenda.
Sure, Bindu. Would you share the slide? That might help. Yeah. Thanks, Bindu. Yeah, like I said, once we have Dr. Singh joining us, she'd probably give us an introductory note on why we are having this webinar. I think a lot of the teachers have been requesting for information and guidance on the new kinds of questions that CBSE has put together. And the whole purpose of the webinar is to allay their fears and concerns, if any, to tell them that this is not something they should be worried about. So I hope we'll achieve that agenda at the end of the session. So we'll deep dive, like I said, into competency-based questions, into the various kinds of questions that CBSE is going to have in their term 1 paper. Case study-based questions, assertion reasoning questions, and writing MCQs to writing skills, which I think is an interesting new question type that has been put forth by CBSE. We will take questions, like I said, because I think the whole point is to be able to respond to teachers' concerns about these question types. I will not take any more time. I see Dr. Pragya is here. Dr. Singh, please go ahead with the introductory note.
Yes, thank you, Sarita ji. And let me first welcome our regional director, Shri K.K. Chaudhary ji, for joining us today, sir. Thank you, sir, for joining us on this webinar, sir. And let me just quickly walk you through the context and the objective for this webinar. We have introduced MCQs and MCQs, especially simple and the various kind of MCQs on simple MCQ, complex MCQ, assertion reasoning, and MCQs on writing skills, specifically in the subject English. And there have been a demand from various stakeholders to have a webinar or some sort of orientation program on how to create good multiple choice questions on these skills. And language being language, you have all four kind of skills in it, and it is very it needs a very creative mind to develop a good quality MCQ on the various kinds of skills that we have in language. And in order to assess different competencies that are listed in the syllabus of English class 10th and 12th, it is also more required, all the more required to have a training session or a sort of webinar session where at least some kind of orientation can be given to our practitioners, our practitioner teachers across the country. So this is the background for having a webinar series on all subjects, and today is the fourth one in this webinar series. And the competency-based assessments that we are looking forward to in order to take our students from the rote memorization and from the rote-based learning towards competency-based learning, so that they can achieve success in their lives, so that they can apply their knowledge in the real-life situation. We are looking forward to competency-based assessment, and specifically the competencies which are listed for the subject English. A child should be able to interpret information, should be able to locate the information in a given text and apply this information in a new situation. Then the competencies of analysis, inference, extrapolation within the text and beyond the text are the ones which we are also looking forward to. We want our students to be adept at. And finally, the most important competency is to make connection between the text and the real world. So that the learning goes towards the competency, towards the real life situation. So this is the purpose of having the competency-based assessment. And today's webinar would be focusing on various kinds of multiple choice questions that have been proposed in the syllabus for the term 1. So I hand over the stage to Sarita for further proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Bindu, I think you can take over.
Give me a minute. Can you see my screen, Sarita?
Yes, Bindu. Can't hear you very well. Can you maybe increase the audio a little bit? I don't know whether it's just me. Ruchi ma'am, Pragya ma'am, are you able to hear Bindu well?
We can hear you and we can see the slide as well, but if you can put it on the slideshow, that would be great.
It is in slideshow now. Can you see
Sorry,
the
Bindu?
slideshow?
Not yet.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, can you see? Is this clear?
It's just coming up. Just a minute.
Not loading. Sarita, you want to share?
Sure.
You can't.
Are you all able to see my screen? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Bindu, you can tell me when you want me to move to the next slide, and I will.
Yeah, you can move to the next slide, Sarita.
Okay.
Yeah, so as Pragya ma'am said, the CBSE is gearing towards competency-based assessments. And I think the term 1, I think, has brought in two major factors. One is it is competency-based, and the second new factor is that it is going to be completely an MCQ-based paper. So I think this is a pretty new and new situation for most of the schools, most of the teachers and the students. So I hope that, because MCQs have been added as a part of board exams, but we've never attempted a full MCQ paper. So even for teachers to set up a full MCQ paper, it could be challenging. But there are certain advantages. Many teachers believe that MCQs do not, are not very apt for a test. But since this is going to be a fully MCQ test, we need to understand the advantages of a multiple choice question. So the first thing about a multiple, the misconception that MCQs cannot test higher order thinking, that needs to be taken off. Like there is again and again, even in your own class 12 board paper, the sample question paper, there were many questions which were testing higher order thinking skills. That it is actually a misconception that it cannot test higher order thinking skills. The second major advantage of a multiple choice question is it is devoid of subjective scoring. So imagine, like, if you have to evaluate a free response question, if you give the same answer to two evaluators, they are not going to evaluate, in the same way and give them the same score. But in a multiple choice question, if the child picks up the correct answer, they are definite to get at least a point one, right? So it is free of subjective scoring. Then the next point is it's efficient and scalable scoring. So if you have if you have to score a free response question, you definitely need a subject matter expert to do it. Whereas when it is a multiple choice question, if you have the correct answer, you don't need a subject matter expert to do it. There is no judgment involved, required from the evaluator's point of view. So you can scale up the scoring to any number of responses.
Bindu,
Yeah.
could I just request that you move closer to the microphone, please?
Okay.
Just to aid better audio. That's it. Thank you so much.
Is this better?
Not really. We haven't really.
Let me. Can you hear me now?
Slightly better. Just continue, please.
This is better? Okay. So,
Yeah, it is.
yeah. So it's, allows for efficient and scalable scoring to any number of student responses. Another way.
Oh dear.
I think, Bindu, you're muted.
Bindu, I think just check your audio. I think you may have unplugged somewhere. We're not able to hear you.
Can't hear me now?
Faintly, very faintly. Can you just replug your wires again, perhaps?
Madam, kindly take it closer.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Much better now. Yes, Bindu, much
Yes.
better.
Fine. Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah, so another big, huge factor, the plus point of a multiple choice question is it's a good diagnostic tool. When I say it's a good diagnostic tool, I mean that the wrong options are very well planned and very well designed to catch misconceptions. Then it becomes a good diagnostic tool. Then another major point is it does not allow bluffing. When you give a free response question, kids, even if they don't know the answer, they tend to write something and think, okay, at least ma'am will give me 1 point, like no half a point or something like that. So in a multiple choice question, there is no half a point or no thing. There is a fixed point, and you get that if you get it correctly. And if multiple choice question, if they are designed well, and if we get good data from that, it can actually differentiate, good performers from, poor performers. And why this is important is because then we can intervene immediately in a timely fashion and design particular remedies for them. So, the advantages of MCQs have been proven again and again, and most of the standardized tests all over the world have now moved to the MCQ format. So, I think we should, leverage, the advantages of MCQs. Can you go to the next slide?
Bindu, I have a question here to ask.
Yes, ma'am.
A, a good question should test what it intends to test. So can you please explain that? Because we have come to know what are the advantages of MCQ, that's fine. But what exactly a good test?
The next slide.
Yes.
Okay, I will read the extract. I think all the participants must be familiar with this first lesson in the chapter. So we've taken two chapters from the textbook so that questions will be the content will be familiar to you. I will read the extract. God, he wrote. If you don't help me, my family and I will go hungry this year. I need 100 pesos in order to sow my field again and to live until the crop comes because the hailstorm. Okay, Sarita, you want to read the question?
Sure. Based on Lencho's request for 100 pesos, which of these is likely to be his monthly family expense? Option A, 10 pesos.
One question here, Sarita. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Is it really a reading comprehension question?
Valid question, ma'am. Bindu, you want to take that?
Ma'am, we have got these questions. These are actual questions that have been written. But I would say, by very new freshers and newcomers to this field of question making. So the point you were asking, ma'am, what is the characteristics of good question? I think I'll start with first you should check whether the question is testing what you intend to test. So if it is a reading comprehension test, it should test reading comprehension, not some numerical or social studies concept or monthly expense concept. So this question is absolutely irrelevant to a reading comprehension skill. So it's very important. Many questions come like this because they feel that, oh, this is a valid, I mean, I've given the chapter, so the child should be able to answer with some kind of prior knowledge. So it should test a very valid RC question. This might be an extreme example, but we have seen this kind of question. So and when you come up with this kind of questions, there is no way to defend any particular correct answer here. So the second characteristic we are looking for, actually one of the characteristics we are looking for, is that the answer should be indisputable and accurate. So, and in these kind of situations, nobody can tell which is the correct answer. So are you all able to hear me well?
Better than it was before. Is there, if you can increase your audio, try it.
Or Sarita, till I check
No,
that.
I think we can hear you now,
Take
Bindu.
over. Yeah.
That was good.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So this is the second extract, Bindu. And which principle would you like to cover here through this example?
Yes, ma'am. Sometimes it does pass the first test of, does it test what you intend to test? Yes, it does pass the test of what you intend to test. Here, in this extract, Sarita, shall we read the extract?
Sure. Why not? You want me to start off reading it, Bindu?
Yeah.
Okay. Now we're really going to get some water, woman. The woman who was preparing supper replied, yes, God willing. The older boys were working in the field while the smaller ones were playing near the house until the woman called to them all, come for dinner. I'll go ahead and read the question also, Bindu.
Yes, Sarita.
Okay. Okay. What were the boys doing when the woman was making supper? Option A, the older boys were working and the younger ones were playing. Option B, the older boys were playing and the younger ones were working. Option C, the older boys and the younger boys all were working. Option D, the older boys and the younger boys all were playing.
Yeah. So what we want to cover is, though the question is based on the information in the passage, is it really a worthy enough, question to be placed in a summative test? Is it testing something really important, or is it testing something very trivial? So even if you defend that something is a reading comprehension skill, and there are people who will say, oh, it's okay because it's a recall skill, so we need to have some recall skills. But you can have recall skills on points that are worthy enough to test, not on some some particular verb and noun you pick up and then you play with those nouns and verbs. So in that manner, if there is a passage with 100 sentences, I can create 100 questions. But that's not what is important. What is important is whether the question is worthy enough to test. Sarita, because
Yes,
my voice is low, do you want to take over from here till I fix the audio issue?
sure, Bindu. I think, yes, absolutely. Why not?
I think that's a better idea. Bidu, let's please fix up the audio issue, and Sarita, please take it over from here.
Yeah,
Yes, ma'am.
Right.
take over from here.
Okay,
Okay.
please.
Give me 1 second. Okay. Shall we read this question? I'll read the question. This is again from A Letter to God. The boys exposing themselves to the rain ran out to collect the frozen pearls. What literary device has been used in the underlined phrase, and why have the raindrops been compared to that phrase?
Sarita, yeah, we have two questions here. So, does it follow any principle at all of a good MCQ?
Yes, it is. It actually flouts one of the good points, ma'am. We want to be focusing on only one concept per question, because when a student answers that question, and if they get it right, they may be getting it right based on only one concept that they have understood, whereas they may not have understood the second concept if there are multiple concepts being tested in that question. So here we have two concepts being tested. One is, the concept of the literary device, and then why have the raindrops been compared to that, why have the raindrops been compared to that phrase? So ideally, we want to avoid this, have only one concept being tested per question. So yes, you're right in that we don't want to be focusing on multiple skills, because testing them and then analyzing, measuring what the student has understood and not understood, which skill they know, becomes difficult. Yes.
Sarita, there are few instances wherein we have two answers to one question. So, or there's some sort of ambiguity. So, do you have an example to explain that?
Ambiguity, is it where
Or indisputable or something, there is no, clear-cut answer.
yes,
So,
yes,
do you have
yes,
some
yes,
example
yes,
for
yes.
that?
Let's go to that. Yes, let's go to that. I will go to that. Can you all see the questions on the screen? This is from A Tiger in the Zoo. And I'll read the question. There's an extract given, two stanzas given there. The contrast indicated in the given extract is between dash. And the options are A, the tiger's reality and the tiger's ideal situation. B, the luxury of a zoo and the simplicity of a jungle. C, how the tiger feels and how the tiger should feel. And D, how deer walk in the zoo and how they walk in the jungle. The whole point of this question is we need to ask, when we have options, we need to give options that we can definitely say are right. Any overlapping options make it difficult for the student to choose, because we are assuming, or rather telling the student, that there is only one correct answer. When we have multiple correct answers, we make it difficult for the student to choose the correct answer, because there are two here that would work in the same situation. This example shows that. I think the contrast given in the extract here, the tiger's reality and the tiger's ideal situation, that is the correct answer here. But if you see the options, you see this student data, option C has also been chosen as the correct answer. Very close data in terms of that. Very close options as well. We want to create options where the correct answer is clearly correct, and the distractors, while plausible, are defendable, and we can say that they are wrong. Does that answer your question, ma'am?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Bindu, are you ready to take over?
You can't, can you hear me?
No, we still can't hear you.
Can you hear me
Sarita,
now?
please carry forward. I mean,
Yes. Huh. Okay. Do this. Okay. Let me read this question. Again, another one from Tiger in the Zoo. Lurking in the shadow, sliding through long grass. Which of these best describes the tiger in the above lines? Scared and hidden, sly and light-footed, dominant and clever, graceful and eye-catching. Okay. Sorry, give me a second. I seem to have. Are you all able to see my screen?
no, I think you have missed. You have the previous slide. Yes. No.
Okay. Okay. In this question, what we are trying to say is that when we create the options, each of those options tell us about the thinking of the student. Here in this option, the correct answer is B, sly and light-footed, based on the context that we have provided to the students. Based on the two stanzas that we're given, the answer is option B. But we see that students have also chosen other options, option A, C, and D. And we can clearly say why they have chosen those options. Scared and hidden is probably prior knowledge. They are not looking at the context of the poem. They're using their prior knowledge as to what would they probably do when they're scared and hidden. They're lurking in the shadow, sliding through long grass. They're interpreting that as fear and therefore saying, they've chosen option A. So when we choose our options, we need to make sure that we are able to test misconceptions. We are able to test the thinking of the students behind their choice of options. Ma'am, we've come to the end of the characteristics of good questions. Would you like to summarize them for us?
Yeah, definitely. We have already actually gone through the examples of each of these characteristics. So let me sum it up. So a good question must test what it intends to test, as we saw in the example for the reading comprehension. It must test core understandings.
Yes.
Then a good question should be, the answer should not be any ambiguity. It should be indisputable. It must stimulate thinking. And it should test as a whole, should stimulate different cognitive skills and should provide good insights into students' learning, the errors, gaps in understanding, and misconceptions, so that it gives an idea for the teacher to move forward.
Yes.
The good question is always focused and it's exclusive. So these are the characteristics of a good question, which every teacher must take care of while framing a question.
Yes. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, please.
Bindu? Not able to hear you now. Okay, we'll go ahead. Okay. Okay.
Can you go back to the slide?
Yes, Bindu. To the previous slide?
Yeah, the previous slide.
Yes.
So can you hear me? Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Clear now.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So see, all these factors, these good characteristics, and we keep talking about all these good characteristics. Not only in the sense of like it's a good question, But overall, if there are many questions that don't follow these standards, what it will affect us. Go to the next slide. It will affect the entire. Go to the next slide, Samita. It will affect the entire reliability and the validity and the fairness of the entire test paper itself. So what we mean by reliable is that the performance data what we receive is kind of replicable. If the same set of students take the test again, we should get the same, similar representative data on the performance. In the same way, validity also. Like, what is validity? It actually tests accurately what it wants to test, whether the construct validity and the content validity and all. So these are like statistical concepts, but it's important that all these play a role in making the test paper itself strong. Otherwise, our test paper will not be defendable as a valid paper. Okay, so if the questions are not written well, then we will not get to know the insights of the insights of what students know, and in that case we will lose opportunities to improve learning and teaching, and then our scope to rethink our education policies. Okay, go to the next slide. I'll tell you how it affects. There are questions which have problems, and we end up dropping those questions from scoring it. So, for example, if you see here, uh, 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 in this question, what is a biscuit maniac? The question it says, keeping the passage in mind, which of these questions would you ask the wrestler? So the moment you say you, right, would you ask the wrestler, then any answer can be correct. Now, if you see option B, right, look at how many kids have chosen that. Just 9.7% of the entire population has chosen B, which means like there is something really problematic in this question. So this the data will tell. Once you get the data, less than 10% of the population chooses, the correct answer. There is definitely there is something of a problem. And then you can see the second data point called PBC. What that tells us is how many of the, well-performing students in the whole test chose that particular answer. And you can see that number is in a negative, which means none of the good performers have chosen this question. So these data points are very important to actually tell us whether the item is good and whether it is valid and reliable. Okay, so in the interest of time, I'll skip the next two slides, which bring out the same point. Basically saying that, these, the good characteristics go in improving the validity of the test paper as a whole. Okay. Yeah. So now, let's check. No, we saw what are the good characteristics that a question should have. Now, what are those things that we should be careful about at like an individual question level inside the question? What are the things we need to keep track of? Like, so there's a checklist which we can use to, see like whether we are there any flaws in our questions. Okay, so there are two types of flaws. One is the irrelevant difficulties, and one is the test wise factor. So what I mean by irrelevant, there are two things. One is a good student, a well performing student is not able to answer a question, then there are some kind of difficulties that the question is posing to them. So these are, irrelevant difficulties, not relevant to the concept being tested. So when a good student is not able to answer a question, then there is, there are some irrelevant difficulties. Or in the
Bindu,
same
can I interrupt
manner,
you for a second here? Bindu, when you're saying irrelevant difficulties, are we assuming there are relevant difficulties as well?
yes, there are relevant difficulties, right? Like, anybody wants to take a guess here?
Maybe the format of question. When you have a simple MCQ, it is simple to attempt in the sense that there is a lesser mental load. But when you have complex MCQs, this mental load, I mean, it increases. So
Correct.
that the format itself becomes or creates a sort of difficulty level. So this
Definitely.
is
Yeah,
And I
definitely.
think when you add a higher cognitive load to an already complex MCQ, that makes it that much
It's
more
all
tougher.
the more difficult.
Yes.
Yes. So there are these, these are relevant difficulties in the sense they don't interfere with the answering of the question, right? And even like how much prior knowledge do I need to answer this question, right? And are the even the fact that are the options easily eliminatable? Though even those things play a factor in relevant difficulties. So when we say irrelevant difficulties, these are factors that hinder the answering of the question, right? So we need to so when we say free of irrelevant difficulties, we mean like no, it should be clear and concise. It should be reader friendly. It should have a reader-friendly phrasing. It should be engaging and not distracting. You should have sufficient content to answer, and there should be no bias, sensitivity issues, and taboos. Now, when we come to the other set of issues where even a poor reading child, like who has not comprehended the passage, is able to pick up the correct answer because of certain features of the question and not because like the child has comprehended or knows the answer. So these are called test-wise factors. So what are the test-wise factors that help poor performers to pick up the right answer? So these are the external and the internal clues. There will be some observed options that in the MCQ, in the options that they can rule it out, and the options need to be homogeneous. They're not homogeneous. So if any option stands out, then it becomes like no, it kind of attracts attention as a wrong answer or a right answer. Okay. So, Sarika, you want to go through the irrelevant difficulties factors that interfere with the answering of the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's look at the irrelevant difficulties that Bindu just spoke about, but through examples, because I think that's the best way for us to understand them better. The first difficulty, I think first thing that each of us have to keep in mind when we're creating multiple choice questions is to avoid questions that that have extraneous information. You don't want information in the stem that is not relevant. So if you look at the example that you're seeing on the screen right now, I'll read the question to you. Lencho, the main character in the story, is shown as a hardworking person. He loves his family and is worried about not being able to care for them. After his crops are destroyed, he goes to the post office. The question is, why does he go to the post office? Now, when you read the question, it's quite obvious that the information that is there above the question is not relevant to the question at all. We have unnecessarily made the student read that much information to answer a question where that information is not helpful. These are some things we should keep in mind, not have extra information, extra unnecessary information that will prevent it or distract or prevent a student from answering correctly. While we keep that in mind, we also need to make sure that a STEM that we create has enough context. We don't want it to be so concise that there is no context. So if you look at the second example on the screen, why did he go to the post office? And there are 4 options over there. The question here is a standalone question with no context. We don't know who the he in this question is. We don't know that it refers to Lencho. Perhaps a good way to rephrase that would have been, in the story, A Letter to God, why did Lencho go to the post office? And that should be enough to give students some context about what we're talking about to be able to answer the question. So keep the question clear and concise so students are able to get enough context to answer the question that's being asked. Okay. Another thing we need to keep in mind is to reduce the reading load, the cognitive load of students when they're answering a question. In the example on the screen, I'll read out the question. Which of these is indicated in the poem? A contrast between the tiger, a contrast between the tiger's reality and the tiger's ideal situation, a contrast between the luxury of a zoo and the simplicity of a jungle, a contrast between how the tiger feels and how the tiger should feel, a contrast between how deer walk in the zoo and how they walk in the jungle. Now, in all the 4 options, the words a contrast between have been repeated. We are again here making the students read something that can be put in the stem and which will help them reduce the reading load. So we could rephrase this question as, which of these has the correct set of ideas contrasted in the given? extract. And that way we can avoid repeating these in the options. Okay, I'll move on to the next question. Another thing to keep in mind is not to use personal pronouns in the STEM, because it makes the question very subjective. We are asking in the question that you can see on the screen, why do you think the poet uses the phrase should be in the first line of the stanza? And here we're asking, why do you think? We're asking the student to give their opinion of why they think. And by using a personal pronoun, we are encouraging students to give their own subjective opinion. So it's going to be very difficult to mark a question as right or wrong. We will not be able to justify or tell students that your answer is wrong, because we've asked for a subjective opinion and that's what they have offered. So we want to avoid personal pronouns in the STEM as well. And wherever possible, we want to try to use closed stems as much as possible. Bindu, you want to weigh in on why we prefer this format, a closed stem versus, like a fill in the blank option?
So usually when we do a closed stem, when we do a open stem, see, for example, in this question, right, in the poem, the tiger dash, the tiger, like, it's like, you can say 100 things about the tiger, right? And we don't know what, so when a closed stem is given, what can you say about the tiger in the poem? What can you say about something? So it should be more focused. So when you have a closed stem, it is possible to be more focused, right? So that's the reason.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on. Apart from having a clear and concise stem, we also want the stem to be reader friendly. What do we mean by that? We want to be using vocabulary or words in the STEM that is one grade lower. Say you're creating questions for grade 6, while the passage and the text should be grade appropriate to the grade 6 students. The words and the vocabulary we used when framing the questions should be to the grade 5 level. The reason for this is we are not trying to test the students' ability to unpack the question. They should not have trouble understanding the question and answering it. We are trying to test their understanding of the text or the passage. So when we are creating the question, we need to make the question, create the question in such a way that students are able to understand it, to answer it.
Yeah, Sarita, can I add here?
Yes, go ahead.
So, for example, in this question, if you see, right, the fourth option says, blessing in disguise. So it's better to avoid this kind of expressions and idiomatic this thing, because you're asking to have a knowledge on those things. Even the second question, no, it uses the word echoes. Which of these proverbs echoes the main idea? So, echoes in all are figurative, usage of words, and it's always better to avoid things. And also, like in options A and C, you can see contractions being used. Better to avoid contractions. Use active voice, simple tenses, and simple sentences wherever possible. This is coming from the angle of making the reading not challenging for the students. Yeah, you can go to the next.
Another important thing to avoid is negative phrasing, because it again makes a question more difficult for students to understand. They need to read the question, figure out what it means, and then figure out what the opposite of that is. And by when I mean opposite, I mean the negative version of that. And that again adds to the cognitive load. There are some cases where we can't avoid that, but as much as possible, we should try to avoid not questions or negative frame question. And at
Sarita,
yes.
Sarita, I think we are, going a little thin on time. So, shall we like briefly go through the points and then go to the case-based study? Because I think the more important sessions on assertion-based reasoning and writing questions are very important, and we should not hijack the time from there. So let's. Can you quickly go? I will just read through the.
Sure, go ahead, Bindu.
No,
yes,
you change the slide. Whichever is important, then I can explain and go through it. Yeah.
Okay, fine. Yes. Just tell me where to pause.
Yeah. So it's important to have very grade appropriate familiar context. Don't use very adult context like life insurance. Like have context which students will talk. And at the same time, not too over familiar, like saying houses have roof and houses have door, and it's all very placid and very boring kind of context. Go to the next slide. So have an engaging context. At the same time, it doesn't have unrealism, it doesn't have irrelevant humor, or it doesn't evoke very strong emotions. Yeah, go to the next one. And
I'd
this
like
is
to
very
add one thing, Bindu. Yeah, you have come to it. I mean, when we talk about the context, I mean, there should not be any biases. There should not be anything that is that is non-biased, right?
Yes, yes. That's the point we're coming to here, ma'am. So here in this question, if you say, see, it says Atik scored 2 boundaries and no other run in his first over, and it works on the word boundary, and only kids who have knowledge of cricket and what boundary means, that it is 4 runs, only those kids can answer it. So we call it a biased question because it kind of deters a major population from answering the question. Right? So a question has to be accessible to the wider population. So that's very important. And these are things anyway many teachers would know. Be very sensitive to socio-economic concerns. Don't have very expensive items mentioned like red luxury car being gifted to children on their birthday and all those things. It's kind of these factors have been studied by research studies and have shown that no, they do interfere in a psychological point of view. They do interfere in the ability to answer the questions. Okay. Let's go to case-based studies then. I will quickly go through the test-wise factors. Don't repeat any words from the stem. No, go back to the previous one.
Okay.
Yeah. So when you have options, don't repeat words from the stem into the correct answer. If you see here, only options B and D have the word tiger, okay, which relates to the title of the poem. So children will kind of pick on this visual cues and start answering. Go to the next one. And these are also, there are some external cues, okay? So where if you double test the same idea, a child can pick up the answer to one question from another question. So these are called external cues. The first one is asking, why is the poet troubled by the tiger's condition? And then the second question is asking, what is the tone of the poem? So actually from this, you can answer the other one. So this is called external cluing. Next one. So have valid
sorry.
So have valid options. See, if you see this question, most of the kids, many have chosen B, many have chosen C and D. And this is a good question to take to your children and ask why they chose this question. Maybe, there is some misconception or error that is happening there. These are also called hinge questions nowadays. Hinge questions have become very popular. That is like, there are 2-3 key questions the teacher will use for that chapter. And if the children are able to answer, she will go to the next chapter. So those are the hinge questions. So it's very helpful in that manner. Go to the next one. What are the other test-wise factors? Click on it. Yeah, and all the options should be parallel in length and everything, which we call the look and feel of the question should be the options should be very homogeneous. Next one.
Okay.
Yeah, don't have absurd options. Click again. This is one more. No. Back.
Not opposite pair of options?
Don't have opposite pair of options. Then. And do not use qualifiers like, don't use, specific qualifiers like never, always, and vague qualifiers may, and some, because, in using common sense, we can weed out certain, options as wrong options. Okay, next one. And all of the above and none of the above are not good options because so if you look at all of the above, like I only have to check A and B to know that D is correct. So So generally, it's better to avoid this. There are like proper reasons for this because of time constraint. If there is time left at the end, I will come back to that. I think the more important part of this session is the assertion reasoning and the writing questions. I think I will let Ruchi ma'am take over now to this thing, and if there is time, we will cover case-based questions. That okay, ma'am? Ruchi ma'am?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much. It also gives me a chance to talk instead of just sit and smile, so which is really great, I think. So fabulous. Let me start sharing the screen. Just let me know whether it's visible.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, great. So fabulous. Let me.
Ruchi, but you can put it on slideshow, please.
It is on slideshow.
Yeah. Okay, great. So we are moving ahead. That's my picture. That's the bulb. That when my mentors, like Dr. Pragya here, explained what assertion and reasoning is, that was the bulb that started for me, everybody. And I hope that when I'm through, this will be the case for all of you. So thank you for being patient. Let's get on with it. Okay.
But I mean, before you begin your presentation, just one question.
Yes.
Can we really have assertion reasoning questions in literature or in languages? How?
Thank you, Dr. Pragya. This is something I've been dying to convince people about, that literature perhaps is the one place where we can have assertion and reasoning. Reason being that there are so many relationships and opportunities in a particular lesson, even the poem, especially the non-fiction pieces, where reasoning plays a very, very big part. So I guess as we go along with the questions, Dr. Pragya, perhaps I'd be able to address this, right? So, when we take this to our kids, we would probably say that assertion is a forceful statement or a fact. Very simple. Let's not get grand with the explanations. And then it's okay to tell them that this is represented with an A. Reasoning, as the word suggests, they are students of English. So rationalize or, to give a reason. So this would be R. Now, the first thing that we need to tell them is that whenever you see an A statement, ask yourself whether it's true or false. Similarly, when you see an R statement, ask yourself whether it's true or false. If both are true, then you move to the next step and say, oh, does it actually give a reason for the first statement? Okay, so let me explain this via example. So now we have our little ones in the class, classes 9, 10, etc. So let's begin with an area that is familiar to them. Okay, we ought not to push them right into the chapter. We are explaining a concept. So we begin with something that is so popular. Even little kids know this, right? So we would say thirsty crow, and then we would show them something like this. And then, like I explained, what is the first thing we do? We say, is it true or false, etc. Okay, so first we show them what are the kind of options. These are standard options. Standard options. I'm sure you've seen them in sample papers, question banks, practice materials, etc. That's being put out by CBSE, right? So these are standard options. So both A and R are true. R is the correct explanation of A and such, right? So once the child has seen the question, tell the child not to just jump the gun. Go to the first part and say, is it true or false? Crow did not find any water in any pond or lake that summer. Yeah, it's true. So we've got one. Water bodies, and look at the next one. Water bodies dry up completely during extreme summer. Yeah, that's true too. So then, what is the relationship? How are we expecting the child's mind to work towards logic and analysis? Because this is reasoning. What will we tell the child? We would say, crow did not find any water in any pond or lake that summer because. That's what we want the child to think. Because. And if the next part is sufficient as a reason, bingo, the bulb. Okay, so obviously this would be the correct answer. Both A and R are true, and R is the correct explanation of A. Let's go to another sample very quickly. Now that you know the process, the crow could not find any water in any pond or lake. Yes, we know that, so it's true. The water in lakes and ponds turn toxic during extreme summer. There's no mention like this in the story. So no, it's not true. So obviously the explanation is not valid. So what will be the answer? The answer would be okay. But this is the major error. So the child, if the child does something like this, it is wrong. So A is true, but R is false. That will be the answer, not this. A lot of children jump the gun and they take that as the answer because they feel that that is the process they have to follow. So we have to be very careful. There is no need to get into reasoning the moment one of these things is false. Okay. Now let's go back to our lesson, something familiar. Let's have a look at this. There was an hour-long onslaught of hail. Yes, we know that. Lencho was satisfied with a field full of ripe corn. Yes, we know that as well. So is there a relationship? Both statements are true. So we look for the relation or the reason or the explanation. There was an hour-long onslaught of hail because Lencho was satisfied. Certainly not. It doesn't make sense. So the child himself, herself would be able to get to the answer immediately, right? So then is not the correct explanation. Similarly, you have others. Lencho's field was totally destroyed because there was an hour-long onslaught of hail. Yes, makes sense. So then this becomes the answer. It is the correct explanation. Okay, try this one from Nelson Mandela. One special national anthem was played on the inauguration day. No, I don't recollect one being played. I remember reading that there were two. So I'm not very sure whether this statement is right or wrong. So I think it's false. The system had recognized the rights of all people regardless of their skin color. Yes, this is true. So what would be the answer? A is false. I didn't even bother to tell the child, or as a child, I didn't even bother to establish a relationship via explanation. It says no need because one of the statements is false. Okay. Now, this was the area. See, two national anthems. I'm sure all you teachers know it like the back of your hand, right? So we can always draw the attention of the child to the context. What about tiger in the zoo? Very popular today. So here is your stanza, and look at this. The tiger escapes to the water hole. Huh? No, the poor chap is caged. So this is certainly not true. So if it's not true, let me check the other one. The tiger finds its prey near the water hole. Ah, it's possible because the poet's saying that that's where the tiger ought to be stalking. So we would say, we would not even bother with the because, and we would simply say A is false, but R is true. Okay. So let's go to the another type before we conclude assertion reasoning and move on to writing. Again, just because it is not a technical subject, just because it's a literary subject, a subject that has depth of relationships which we can create amongst characters and situations, etc., we try another type of question instead of just the plain A and R to help the child hone the logical or the analytical ability. So we go for the 1 and 2 type. So when you are revising the 1 and 2 type with the children, it would be nice if you could again begin from the simple. You could take this, you could take Cinderella, you could take Monkey and the Crocodile, you could take a popular Akbar Birbal, anything that you'd like, right? So the crow threw pebbles in the pitcher. Yes, we know that. The water level in the pitcher rose. Yes, we know that. Okay. Now let's see. One can be inferred from two. What does it mean? That in order to know one, okay, two is important. Okay. Okay. Perhaps one is independent of two. Certainly not. Both are related. Two precedes one. The water level in the pitcher rose. It precedes one. Did this happen before the crow throwing the pebbles? No. Two is the effect of one. Yes, 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 yes. Two definitely is the effect of one. Okay. So we play with the different relationships. It's all about analysis. Earlier, we are doing the because. Over here, we are telling the child to go with elimination by applying logic. Okay, right? Let's apply this to our lesson 1 and 2. There was an hour-long saying, okay? Hour-long onslaught of hail. Lencho was satisfied with a field full of ripe corn. So can 1 be inferred from 2? Is 1 the answer and 2 its question? Okay? 2 precedes 1. 2 is the effect of 1. So yes, anybody from the audience? And I'm sure you already know the answer. Yes, you're very right. 2 precedes 1. Because once there was hail, there was no field full of ripe corn actually. Okay. Then we move on to the same one. Over here, I've listed the answer for you. Very clear. All right. 1 follows 2. Okay. However, these are 2 national anthems. Okay. Because this is not an AR. So we've given the correct kind of input. Right. So here's this. And then finally, one of my favorites, you have the same poem, the same stanza, and the poet feels the tiger belongs in the wild. See, should be lurking. So the poet feels the tiger belongs in the wild. The tiger is caged. So 2 is the solution. 1 is the problem. 2 is certainly not the solution. 1 is the explanation for 2. No, 1 is not the explanation for 2. 2 is an opinion. 1 is a fact. Bingo. 2 is an opinion and 1 is the fact. Absolutely not. And 1 is cause and 2 its effect. 1 is the cause and 2 its effect. Now, if you notice, there is not a single answer here that is correct. What would have been correct? Like, I've taken inspiration from what Bindu and Sarita was telling us. So we need to be very careful when we are creating. So it should be 1 is an opinion and 2 is a fact. 1 is the opinion and 2 is the fact. So I'm sure we've got all of this very clearly. Okay. Let's go on.
In that case, Ruchi, the option C was incorrect. So we need to take care while framing the questions.
Yes, absolutely,
So
Dr. Pragya. Absolutely.
So, in fact, Ruchi, you have actually shown us the competencies of analysis, inference, and all logical thinking can be applied to literature as a subject, and that too, especially through assertion reasoning question. And with your the slide which is in front of me, writing skills MCQs. So, can you actually assess writing skills through MCQs? Because in our subject we have creative writing skills. You write a letter, you write a notice, you write an advertisement or a report. So that is a creative writing skill. So, but can you actually frame a question on this?
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Pragya.
And can you actually assess writing skills through MCQs?
Yes. So, Dr. Pragya,
We need examples for that. Yeah.
Yeah. You've probably echoed what so very many teachers in our country have been sort of feeling. But I recall what you said at the very beginning, that writing is also a part of our syllabus and our curriculum, whether it's term 1 or term 2. In term 1, some circumstances as such, we have a complete MCQ paper. Now, coming to your question, can we assess this? So, many documents by the CBSE have been clearly saying that we are moving to constructing knowledge, helping the learner learn how to learn. That's where we develop our competencies. And that is precisely where this comes in. It's not about the product. It's about the process. So when push has come to shove and we have to test writing skills via MCQs, we have to look towards the skill of writing, which is coming from the process. With your permission, I'll just go on to explain this particular aspect. Thank you. So when we are looking at this, let's have a look at a regular kind of exercise that we do in class. You are Amarjeet Kaur or Ashim Sheikh of class 10. You have noticed that people in and around your neighborhood do not segregate their garbage before disposal. Write a letter to the editor of the local daily elaborating on the need of garbage segregation and its advantages. Okay. Suggest ways to help people inculcate this necessary habit. It's a standard question, a question that children probably, these type of questions you've been doing in classrooms, your children are privy to it. So when you begin teaching something like this in class, forget MCQs right now. When you begin teaching something like this in the classroom, how do we do it? So we say, okay, children, what do you reckon should be a part of this letter? Meaning that we ask them what the letter would include. So we help them collect the ideas. We would either do it through the very popular brainstorming, group discussion, or we could also do it by something like a word web or a mind map, etc. Next, once they've collected their ideas, what do we ask them to do? Oh, great. That's like a whole lot of ideas. Now, can all of you get into groups or across the screen? Can you sort of look at these three things that have been asked in the letter, like need, advantages, and suggestions? Okay, these are the three major things that have been asked. Can you look at all these collected ideas and can you organize? Wait, I'm sharing a graphic organizer with all of you. Okay, and the teacher does. Whereas here you have needs, you have advantages, you have suggestions. So the children already have the ideas. Now they segregate. So they are organizing those ideas. After they have got this resource, which they themselves have created, with you acting as a facilitator, dear teachers, then you would probably come to getting them to write. Earlier, when we were probably not as equipped or informed, we used to show them a sample and say, okay, could you please clone? Could you underline the popular phrases? We were teaching to the test. But the NEP, CBSE, you read all the research, it says it's all about the process. It's all about the process. It's all about the learning is there. Okay. So when they draft the letter, this is the fun time. Okay. So they write at this point of time, what are they looking at? What is the skill that we are looking at? Can they link their ideas in sentences? Do they know their formats? We ought not to obsess about formats from the very beginning. This is the stage where perhaps we could take a pause and then explain the formats or ask them to look at a model and decipher or deduce the formats for themselves, right? And we talk about organization of paragraphs. So we talk about a topic sentence because each paragraph would have a topic sentence and supporting sentence and concluding sentences. That's very, very important for coherence and cohesion. So we talk about drafting the letter. The last thing that we would probably ask them to do is edit the draft. It's not about the red pen anymore. So, a lot of things that we've been doing over the past 2 years, whether it's experiential learning or constructivism, etc., it has to happen intrinsically. So they look at their work and they figure out where they've gone wrong. Now, how would they do it, or how would their peers do it? They aren't, exceptional when it comes to knowledge that has not been given to them so far. So we do that with the help of checklists. Okay. Now, instead of the teacher using teacher talk time to say, do this, don't do this, this is what is to be done, you simply put all of that in the checklist. Either sometimes you tell the child himself or herself to work through the checklist, or you would perhaps ask them to exchange and then refer to the checklist and figure out whether the points have been taken care of. Now, this is the essence of writing skills MCQs. This is the essence. So C, O, D, and E. R is missing because they are not writing or revising to put it across, which God willing will happen in term 2, right? But for now, we stick with the code for the coder. Now, let me just give you some exemplars so that we can wrap it up in time. So, like
One thing to note here is that there can be two kinds of MCQs on writing skills. One is typically on the format. So how do you begin this? This is the situation. So given the situation that you have given it, situation of for the letter writing. So how will you begin this writing? What will be the complementary clause? What will be the subject, etc., etc. So that would be a completely based on the rote testing skills There won't be any competency skills that would be measured or assessed through those sort of questions. They wouldn't ask, they wouldn't require any sort of thinking in the sense, directly you have mugged up the format and you have answered. So that is one set of questions that could be formed. We are not looking at that. We are looking at the process of arriving at that writing. So that involves thinking, that involves analysis, that involves creativity. So that point
Dr.
should be
Pragya.
manifested here.
I so love you for saying that. Thank you so much, because the kind of materials that we see floating around on WhatsApp are just talking about date here, right, left, this, yours sincerely, yours truly, yours. There are wars happening among my peers about what is to be used. But the point is, that's not really testing any, skill that we need to write home about. It's hardly a thinking process for the child. Okay, so let me show you some examples. Thank you, Dr. Pragya. That was the point beautifully made. Okay, let's talk about collecting of ideas. Okay, let's look at the examples here. So we'll stick with Seema throughout. Okay, we have 5 to 6 minutes to wrap this up. So Seema decides to write a letter to the editor of a national daily about adulteration in food products. So this is the overarching rubric. So the questions will follow from the same thing. Okay, so here you go. Your first question. Select the option that correctly displays the causes for adulteration in food products. Now we are collecting ideas. Think of it like that. As a teacher, we are collecting ideas for what are the causes you are going to, in the causes paragraph, what are the causes that you will list. So we've showcased the option. That's just about it. It's not rocket science. It is precisely what all of you have been doing. It is just what you've been doing. Don't get confused by what date, you've heard Dr. Pragya's talk about it in clear terms. It's just recall. It's something we've made them memorize. So we are not focusing on something like that right now. Okay. So you have this, then you class 9 teachers have been going a little batty with the idea of doing story writing as an MCQ. So I quite understand where you're coming from, but let me show you an example. Now we are still at collection of ideas, right? So read the story cues and answer the question. So your syllabus says that there would be cues given, okay, or there would be a beginning of a story or something would be given. So the question is, select the option that supports the cues. Very simple. It's very simple. Obviously, he grabs a sandwich, he collapses in relief, he feels hungry. I mean, he is terrified out of his wits. Okay, so obviously, if you sort of give it a go, when you're going to view the video again, you could definitely pause and attempt it. So we are looking at this. Look at the shivering yet perspiring, musters courage. Can I give you a little tip here that when you're doing these things, it's going to be really good if you sort of speak these aloud. You remember what Bindu and Sarita were doing? They were reading out the MCQs. It really helps, when you're training your children, etc. So this was there in the sample paper for class 10th, and see, it's very clearly collection of ideas. You're very familiar with this question. It was collection of ideas. That's it. So difficulties. What would you write in difficulties? Could anybody please tell me? Imagine yourself saying that. And that is what it is. Which one would be the correct ideas? Okay. Now we come to organizing ideas again. Very simple. How do we organize the ideas? I showed you. We ensure that our kids use graphic organizers, mind maps, charts, etc. So same rubric. Seema is writing. Seema will continue writing to the editor till the very end. So you'll have to carry on with that. So the rubric for organizing the ideas is select the suitable topic sentence for the paragraph about suggestions for harnessing food adulteration. Now, the question also said that the letter requires that the suggestions would be put in place. Now the teacher is saying that, okay, if you have to begin suggestions, what would be the topic sentence that would indicate that the suggestions are going to follow? So if you look at this very, very clearly, this one is more or less a definition. This one is talking about a particular practice. This one is talking about a consequent, but this beauty over here is opening up the paragraph for the child to write the suggestions. There has to be some kind of an opening. A topic sentence basically grabs the main idea. So that comes from organizing a writing skills, which is why Dr. Pragya mentioned in the beginning, it's about the skills, the process. If the child has followed the process, the learner has followed the process in the classroom, this would be like, okay, you have an MCQ teacher teaching me the same thing. Okay, yeah. And for story, what is it that we teach? 4 years, 5 years it has been since story has been a part of the syllabus. We should know this like this. So what is the organizer for story? Obviously a plot diagram. We teach our children the plot, we teach our children the climax, anti-climax, we teach them the conflict aspect. Okay, for those who are not very clear, just you could check up something called FREYTAG, Freytag, FREYTAG apostrophe S, Freytag's pyramid, or the plot diagram. Primary school teachers say story mountain. So it's not about getting the child to write. It's about telling the child, okay, these are the cues. Could you add a bit here and there? And then could you please first organize? It's 150, 200 words, the child. And if they don't have a plot diagram, dear teachers, can I tell you that it will end up being a narrative? It will not be a story because they will not have rising and falling action. The problem will not be resolved. So it cannot be a story. It will just remain a narrative. Now look at this. So if the child knows the organizer, okay, and this has been in the curriculum for the past 4-5 years, we've been doing this. Earlier it was there even for class 10. Then we moved on to analytical paragraph writing, which was also very, very important. Okay, so this obviously is the setting and the characters, and this is the resolution, the denouement. Don't worry about that, just the conclusion or the resolution, which makes this the moment where we wait with bated breath. This is the climax. Okay, so yes, this is what one is saying, that could you please arrange any 3 cues that are listed here correctly on the plot diagram. Okay, so we're still at organizing and we've ended. This was a question on organizing in the sample paper. So it was not just plucked out of a tree. There is thought behind creating these kind of questions because we had to. Okay, CBSE had to, given the circumstances. Okay. Then we come to drafting, and we are just 2 minutes away from handing over to Sarita and Bindu and Dr. Pragya. So we focus on, this is when the child is writing. Now just sit back, close your eyes and imagine, what is the child doing when the child is writing? So the child is linking the sentences, the child is probably putting the format in place, or the child is organizing. Okay, so same, Seema is still writing, poor thing. See, it's taking her so long to write the letter. Okay, so now if you're checking fluency, what are we going to do? We are going to give a question like this. Now this probably is the easiest for the children because they have completely memorized phrases in letters, etc. So we would probably give something like this. Okay, select the option that suitably completes the given line of her letter. Okay, and I think all of you know this. Only tip that I would give you is never just be happy with the choice of an answer. Always ask your learners, why not A? Why not C? Why not D? Because the learning is there. They will never ever forget it. And it will make you feel really good that they know. Now we come to the drafting part of the story. Look at this. Now, when they are drafting, what is it that they need to remember in a story? Sensory language, okay, literary devices, all right? Are they descriptions and such? Okay, so the question is based on that premise. It's a story. It warrants that kind of language. Okay, so we are saying that select the option that lists the best use of figurative language to describe the boy's terror. So very clearly it has to be the boy's terror. It cannot be something else, that he was determined or he groped around, etc. It can't be, okay? And I'm sure as teachers, if you were to redo this question, you'd come up with better options. Please go ahead and do it when you are going to view the video again, right? And you have from the drafting section, you have something like this in the sample paper as well, okay? Yeah. Same for this one, again from the drafting section. The appropriate subject, okay? So this warrants the child's understanding of the kind of voice, or obviously the fact that it cannot be a question, it's a subject, so it's coming like this. These they would not have a problem negotiating, okay? And then finally, you have editing. So what do we do in editing? I explained that earlier. Seema is finally ending her letter. So select the option that correctly substitutes the underlying portion of the letter. Very simple. Correctly substitute. Okay, so the child knows, oh, boss, they're asking me to correctly substitute. That means this is not correct. Let me have a look. Oh, no, it's certainly not correct. Let me look at the options. Fabulous. Okay, yeah. So that's what it is. Same goes for the story. I love this. This is quite a favorite of mine because it's a story and it's descriptive, etc. Read carefully through a portion of the story. So now you've given the child a portion. Very, very short sentence, okay? Reading load, we need to remember. So the word guided should be deleted. Why? If you delete this word, it won't make sense. The word continuous should be replaced by pleasant. Continuous should be replaced by pleasant. I have never ever come across a collocation that says pleasant rasping sound. That doesn't happen. There is nothing pleasant about a rasp. The word pounding should be replaced by steady. Pounding, heart pounding, steady heart. It says here he was terrified. How can it be a steady heart? And then the word advanced should be deleted. The boy advanced forward. 100% it's this, because you're saying the same thing really, aren't you? Right? So at the end, very quickly, what's the mantra? C-O-D-E-R. Repeat after me, C-O-D-E-R. Thank you very much. I hope that has made some kind of sense. Sarita, over to you. I'll just put
Yeah,
this down.
thanks a lot, Ruchi. In fact, this was a really wonderful presentation, and actually, it has told us and manifested the concept of assessment as learning. The moment you go through the process of writing skills or drafting and coder, the entire thing, entire formula of coder, so it becomes actually a process of learning. And a question on an MCQ on writing skill clearly drafted and properly drafted is an example of assessment as learning. So this, I hope our participants have actually gained something, and the queries which have been coming to us, how to write, how to create an MCQ on writing skills may have been addressed. So over to you, Sarita and Bindu, for the last section, please.
Thank you, Pragya ma'am. Would it be okay if we looked at some of the questions that have come in from the audience? I think that would be a perfect time.
Yes,
Thank
yes,
you,
yes,
Ruchi
please.
ma'am. That was wonderfully lively and very, very engaging. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. I'll just quickly pose some of the questions that have come from the audience, and I will let any of you all take it up because I think they are all questions that any of you could answer. If there is one that you all particularly want to answer, that's fine as well. So I will go ahead with that. One question that has come in, and that's probably because we did not get to covering case-based, questions and passages today, is that diagram-based MCQs have been introduced that have not been done before. So how do we help students understand the question and prepare to answer this question?
So I assume, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Bindu.
Yeah, so I'm assuming this is related to the case-based factual passages,
I
right?
think so too,
So
yes.
there is a misunderstanding that case-based means like only like that has maps or tables or charts. So that's not what is intended. What is intended, it can also be a continuous text supported by graphics and data, but it need not be like pure diagram, right? And infographic is also fine, which presents information in a graphic form, but it need not necessarily be this thing. And those questions should test only the comprehension of the information. But the kind of skills that will be used for those questions are higher order thinking skills, like evaluating the information, integrating the information, checking whether that information is relevant to the topic, those kind of stuff. It's not like a very technical knowledge that it should test.
Right, right. Thank you, Bindu. We have a couple of questions on general MCQ creation. I'll go through them, I'll club them together and go through them. One is, how do you ensure students don't choose the correct answer by guessing?
That is, so the guesswork can happen in many ways, right? So if the distractors are all plausible and, you cannot throw away any distractor. See, this is where the cover the option, rule comes in. So suppose you have a question and if I cover all the 4 options, I should be able to answer that. If I'm a good reader and if I've comprehended the passage, no, I should be able to answer that. You know what? In many now that the MCQ is being dominant in the term one, if you open many of the coaching sites, the first thing they tell is we will teach you how to crack MCQs. The first thing they say is don't read the passage. You read the question, and only if you don't know, you go and locate that thing. So that should not how it should be. The comprehension should have happened before you go read the passage. And if a person is actually comprehended well, and if you cover the options, they should be able to do it. And only the poor readers will have to look at the options. So when the poor reader looks at the options, that's when the options should be really strong, like plausible, and it should be tempting to pick it up. So yeah, so the distractor, making the distractor strong is a skill, and it comes with a lot of practice.
Thanks, Bindu. There is another question on the validity. Can you elaborate on the reliability and validity of a question paper, it says? I'm guessing it also could refer to a question itself.
Yeah,
Bindu,
so
I think you could take that.
yes, yes. So what we say is reliable is like if I am administering a test to a class 6 section, and if I retest, suppose I give the questions in a unit test, okay, and I retest those concepts in a final test, in a summative test. Those kids who have answered the question in the unit test or the chapter test should be able to answer it in the unit test. So if that performance is not representative of the performance which has already been done, then it's not reliable. It's like saying my measurement tool, once I test, it was giving one result. Another time I use that tool, it's giving me another result. So this tool is not reliable, right? So reliability is just that replication, how well you can replicate the results. But then reliability has a lot of other noises around it. Suppose a child today is taking a test, and there are a lot of other stuff also, like even the ambience of the classroom, even the way the test is conducted, even those can play. So if those factors are different in the different tests, then results may vary. So the reliability is a much more complex issue than validity. But validity is just that how well is your test reflecting a real world task. Like, no, it should be authentic. If you're testing something like that force fitted just for the sake of, asking a question, you're not, testing a comprehension question there. So how well it matches the task, the testing objective, and how well the testing objective reflects an authentic task, like a skill that you would transfer to a real life. That's when we call validity.
Fair enough. Thanks, Bindu. Pragya ma'am, perhaps you can answer this. There's a question here about the paper now offering students. We've always, I think CBSE has always offered choice questions. This teacher, I think teacher wants to know what will happen if students ignore the choice and answer all the questions. How will they be assessed?
We will be soon releasing the guidelines on that. And first of all, there are instructions given. For every question paper, there are instructions given at the top that you have to attempt, say, 16 out of 18 questions or 12 out of 16 questions.
Correct.
So all of us who are watching this program today, so still there is some time to go for the term 1 examination. Please ensure and please tell your students to read the instructions very, very carefully before before starting the question or attempting the paper. So, and moreover, there's no negative marking. And the further guidelines will be issued very soon for this before the exams begin.
Okay.
But for the time being, you need to tell your teachers, to your students that please follow the instructions which are given in the sample paper or the question paper there.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Pragya ma'am. One more question coming your way. It says, is the board giving reading time also this year? I'm guessing for
See, reading time
passages
is
we-
already there. It's already there. And standard process is, I mean, there is no
there'll
deviation
be
in
no
that.
change there.
So,
Okay, okay.
reading
Thank
time
you.
is already given.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
I think we
Some
can
last minute
say-
questions rushing in. Just give me 1 second. Let me see.
See if there are any case-based questions because we didn't get an opportunity to cover that. Is there any important
into
case-based?
the ones that we
sorry.
had. Yes, ma'am.
I can also, it means we can also ask the participants to write to us in case of any query, further query or any other explanation required on case-based passages or the fact or writing skill questions. They can write an email to us.
Right.
And the email ID is given on our website, and we answer all our emails and answer all our phones, so they're most welcome to give to address their queries to us. So in
Fair
case
enough.
of any doubt, please feel free to reach out to us.
So
Yes.
even my slide content, probably I'll pass it to Pragya ma'am, and what we couldn't cover, and probably if there are any questions, they can take it from there and share that as a resource.
Yes, I think that'll be good.
We will
That will be
also
good.
we will also be sharing this entire on the competency-based resources that the tab we have created on cbseacademic.nic.in. I repeat, there is a CBE resources tab which has been which is there on our website www.cbseacademic.nic.in. Therein, all resources, whether they are videos or the webinar clippings or the handbooks, they are there uploaded on this tab, which are, and these are the resources which are related to the competency-based education. So we will upload this as well there, so they can refer to that CBE tab whenever they want to. And in case of any further query, please write to us.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Pragya ma'am, would you like to deliver the concluding note?
I couldn't hear you. Louder, please, Sarita.
concluding note. She's
Would you like to
requesting.
deliver the concluding note, Pragya ma'am?
Okay, right. So we have come to the end of this session today. And I thank our regional director, Sir K.K. Chaudhary ji, for for attending the entire session, sir. Your presence has always been motivational for us today as well, sir. And I thank all my panelists here, those who have given their talks on various aspects related to the MCQs in creating MCQs in English as a subject. And maximum thank I would like to give to my participants, all the teachers who are watching this program. So, and with your support, we will be able to reach out to move forward to our mission of competency-based education and making our students good and committed citizens who are actually who can